The first letter came wrapped in pastel pink paper and smelled like cheap perfume. "Dear Mr. Xander," it read in stiff cursive font, "welcome to the Willow Creek Lakeside community. Per HOA guidelines, we are requesting immediate payment of outstanding dues totaling $18,472.25. Your balance reflects the unpaid fees dating back 7 years. Please remit payment within 30 days. I blinked at the number again. 18,000. For a cabin I bought 2 weeks ago. I just moved into my fixer-upper by the river, surrounded by trees and peace and zero plans of dealing with nosy neighbors. The whole reason I bought this place was because it sat outside any HOA zone. I double-checked that. My real estate agent even printed a map. I wasn't in their jurisdiction, and yet here I was, holding a pastel pink ransom note. I stuffed the letter in my pocket and walked down the gravel road where the pavement ended. That's where the HOA signs started literally. Their edge of the community had a big wooden board declaring Willow Creek Lakeside HOA ESD, 1999. My cabin sat a good 200 feet past that point, on county land, not HOA territory, but apparently that didn't matter to Beverly Armstrong. I met her the next day when she marched up my driveway in white capris and a lemon-yellow blouse, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like she was about to give a TED talk on passive aggression. "You must be Mr. Xander," she said. "I'm Beverly, president of the HOA." She didn't extend a hand. Just stood there judging my porch like it insulted her ancestors. "Hi," I said, leaning against the railing. "You sent me a bill." "Yes," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard. 18,000. You're lucky, really. We waived late penalties." I let out a laugh. "You're not my HOA." Beverly clicked her pen like a weapon. "That's where you're mistaken. The previous owner of this cabin agreed to join the HOA voluntarily when this parcel was on the annexation list. That makes your property subject to our covenants." "I read the county records," I said. "There was no annexation and no voluntary contract. I checked all that before I bought." She blinked, then smiled like she pitied me. "Sometimes documents get lost, but we're happy to provide ours." She handed me a photocopy of what looked like a blurry signature on a form dated 7 years ago. No notary, no county stamp, no legal standing. Just a piece of paper that said Willow Creek HOA membership and a scribble that could have belonged to anyone. "You expect me to pay 18 grand based on this?" She crossed her arms. "If you don't, we'll begin lien proceedings." "That includes legal fees." I stared at her. "You're threatening me with a lien for land you don't even govern." "We'll let the county sort it out," she said, turning on her heel and walking back toward her golf cart. She didn't realize I'd already talked to the county. And I wasn't the only one Beverly had pulled this stunt on. Game on. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office. Not because I needed more proof, I already had everything, but because I wanted a certified copy of the parcel map and zoning records, just in case things escalated. The clerk, a guy named Lionel with a buzzed haircut and a deep knowledge of local land disputes, raised an eyebrow when I told him what happened. "They're trying that again," he muttered as he printed out the documents. "Last year, they tried pulling the same stunt on a retired couple off Sycamore Hill, claimed their RV pad was part of the HOA. It wasn't. What happened? The couple's daughter worked at the state attorney's office. Let's just say Beverly backed off real quick." I tucked the files into a folder. "So she's done this before, more than once. She's been trying to expand that HOA's reach for years. We've flagged it with the county attorney, but unless someone pushes it legally, she keeps finding new ways to harass folks." I left with a folder full of ammo and a gut feeling that Beverly had gotten away with too much for too long. I didn't just want her to back off, I wanted her exposed. Back at the cabin, I installed a set of motion-detecting security cameras facing the road, the front porch, and the mailbox. I wasn't about to let someone accidentally wander onto my property and pull something shady. That night, I found a Facebook group called Willow Creek Survivors. It had only 19 members, but the posts painted a bleak picture. Threats over lawn paint colors, fines for wind chimes, and one guy who got a bill for unauthorized bird feeders. I messaged a few people, including a woman named Angela who said she'd taken Beverly to small claims court the previous spring. When we met at a diner off Route 12, Angela slid a manila envelope across the table before even saying hello. Copies of her fake covenants, the junk signatures, everything, she said. She tried to say my rose bushes were against code. I don't even live in her jurisdiction. She still left warnings taped to my door. I flipped through the pages. Her documents looked eerily similar to the one I'd been handed, same font, same layout, same complete lack of legal validation. Only difference was the name at the bottom. Angela stirred her coffee with a metal spoon. She gets away with it because people get scared. They don't want liens on their homes. She counts on that, but none of her claims ever hold up in court. So why hasn't anyone gone to the sheriff? She tapped her spoon against the rim of the mug. They say it's a civil matter. Unless there's fraud. But proving fraud, that takes more than one person. I knew what I had to do. The next week, I filed a formal complaint with the county attorney's office, attaching copies of Angela's documents, mine, and the certified zoning map. I included a notarized affidavit stating I'd never agreed to any HOA terms and that my land was, by all legal definition, outside their boundary. 2 days later, I got a call from a paralegal named Mason. "What you've submitted is compelling," he said. "But to open a full investigation into fraud, we'll need testimony from at least 3 other individuals who have been targeted the same way." "I can get you 5, I said. I spent the rest of that week meeting with homeowners, documenting their experiences and helping them draft statements. Some had been threatened with foreclosure. One had paid nearly $10,000 in back dues just to avoid legal threats. Another had caught Beverly's treasurer slipping a fine notice under his garage door at midnight. They all had one thing in common. None of them had ever signed anything legally binding. Mason called again the following Friday. "We're moving forward," he said. "This is enough to recommend a formal inquiry." We're looping in the district attorney. The news must have traveled fast because the next morning I woke up to find my mailbox bashed in. Bent metal, shattered post, tire tracks leading back toward the paved road. It wasn't random. I reported it to the sheriff. He took photos, jotted down notes, and said he'd keep an eye on it. I handed him a flash drive with footage from my security camera. It showed a white SUV pulling up at 2:37 in the morning. Someone stepped out in a hoodie, took a bat to the box, then peeled out. "Think it's connected?" I asked. The deputy glanced at the footage. "Plates blocked, but yeah, I think it's connected." Meanwhile, Beverly doubled down. That afternoon, I received a second letter, this time on official-looking letterhead with an embossed seal. It threatened to place a lien within 10 days unless I paid in full or in good faith partial. But the seal, it was fake. I ran it by the secretary at the county clerk's office. She held it up to the light, frowned, and said, "This isn't ours, that's a knockoff." I forwarded the letter to Mason. He called back immediately. "She's manufacturing government-looking documents now. That crosses into criminal territory. We're elevating this." That night, I hosted a backyard meeting with the 5 other homeowners who had joined my complaint. I borrowed a projector from the library and pulled up the zoning map on a screen I rigged between 2 trees. The air smelled like pine and distant river water. We passed around mugs of cider as I pointed to the clear boundary lines. "She's been lying to all of us," I said, "and she's used fear to get away with it." Angela raised her hand. "How long until the DA acts? Soon," I said, "but we can't just wait. We need to make this public. Let the rest of the neighborhood know exactly what's going on." We formed a plan that night. A community forum, open to everyone, held at the local rec center. We'd present the documents, the maps, the testimonies, and let the residents decide whether they wanted to keep trusting Beverly and her fake authority. The flyers went out 3 days later. That's when the anonymous letters started. Folded sheets of paper typed in all caps delivered without postage. Stop your lies or face consequences. One was taped to my truck windshield. Another was slid under my door. I handed them all to the sheriff's office. No fingerprints, no DNA, just intimidation tactics. On the night of the forum, over 50 people showed up. Some wore HOA polos. Others looked nervous. A few brought lawn chairs and snacks like they expected a show. I stepped up to the podium with my folder of evidence and cleared my throat. My name is Xander. I bought a cabin outside the HOA boundary. I was told I owed $18,000 in dues for land that the HOA doesn't legally control. I'm here to show you why that's a lie and how many of you have been lied to as well. The projector clicked on, and the screen lit up with the county parcel map. I pointed to the boundary lines, then cycled through the documents' certified copies, signed affidavits, and the fake forms Beverly had distributed. Angela followed with her story. Then two others did the same. By the time we finished, a buzz had taken over the room, and then Beverly walked in. Wearing a crimson blazer and a tight-lipped expression, she marched to the front row and sat down, arms folded. I looked right at her. You've been threatening homeowners with fake fines, phony documents, and false authority. That ends now. The district attorney has opened a case. Investigators are involved, and every person in this room deserves to know the truth. Beverly stood. This is a disgrace. These are fabricated claims from people who don't want to follow the rules. They're not your rules to enforce, I said, because this land does not belong to your HOA. And the law agrees. The room erupted in murmurs. A man in the back stood up. She sent me a fine for having a boat trailer in my driveway. I'm on county land. Another voice. She threatened to sue me for painting my shutters. I didn't even sign anything. Beverly's face paled. The sheriff walked in 15 minutes later. He approached the podium, nodded to me, and held up a document. This is a notice of investigation. We are collecting evidence related to fraudulent HOA practices. If you've received any questionable correspondence, please report it to the county attorney's office. Beverly left without a word, but the residents stayed. They had questions, they had stories, they had receipts, and now they had each other. 2 days after the community forum, I got a call from Mason at the county attorney's office. His voice was sharper now, more focused. We've confirmed that at least 4 of the documents distributed by the HOA contain forged signatures. One of them belongs to a man who passed away in 2016. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the river as he continued. We've already referred the matter to the district court. Charges are being drafted. There's enough here for criminal fraud, mail fraud, and possibly conspiracy to commit extortion. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the weight of that settle. Then Mason added, "We'll need you to testify. Not just about your experience, but about the documents you were given, the forum, and the evidence you helped collect. Say the word," I told him. By the following week, subpoenas were being served. The treasurer of the HOA, a man named Craig Donnelly, was picked up first. He was the one caught on camera slipping fines under garage doors and had apparently been the one handling the books. But the real twist came when Angela called me one morning before sunrise, her voice tense. "Xander, you need to see this. It's about the road paving funds." I met her outside the community center, and she handed me a flash drive. These are from an anonymous source who used to be on the board. They show where the HOA's money actually went. I plugged the drive into my laptop in my truck and opened the files right there in the parking lot. Invoices, wire transfers, receipts for landscaping services that never happened. A $10,000 charge to a private security firm for surveillance upgrades that didn't exist. And one particularly damning spreadsheet listing consulting fees paid directly to Beverly over a span of 3 years. Over 90 grand, Angela said. That's how much she siphoned off. And they've been using fake dues to cover the gaps. I forwarded everything to Mason and then drove straight to the sheriff's office. Within 24 hours, deputies executed a search warrant on the HOA's office, a converted garage behind Beverly's house. By noon, Beverly was in handcuffs. It didn't take long for the rest of the story to unravel. Beverly had been using falsified annexation paperwork to target properties just outside the HOA's legal border. Her scheme was simple. Claim those homeowners had voluntarily opted in years earlier, present fabricated documents, and threaten liens or legal action if they didn't pay. Many paid. A few didn't, but no one had pushed back hard enough until now. During the arraignment, Beverly stood in court flanked by her attorney, face flat and unreadable. The judge denied immediate bail, citing a risk of document tampering and witness intimidation. The courtroom murmured as the charges were read aloud: fraud, forgery, criminal racketeering, and tampering with public records. The district attorney's office released a statement the next day, calling it one of the most deliberate and organized abuses of HOA authority in state history. But even with Beverly and Craig under investigation, the damage they'd caused hadn't disappeared. Several residents were still dealing with liens that had been filed falsely. One man, a veteran named Earl, had nearly lost his home over it. That's when a group of us decided we weren't done. We drafted a petition to dissolve the Willow Creek Lakeside HOA entirely. The bylaws allowed for it if 60% of homeowners voted in favor. We went door to door, not just with the petition, but with copies of the evidence. It wasn't about revenge, it was about taking back the neighborhood. At first, there was hesitation. Some people had lived under the HOA for so long they couldn't imagine what life was like without it. But when they saw the numbers, how much of their money had disappeared, they started signing. "I paid $6,500 for road repairs last year," said a woman named Carla. "They never even touched my street." "Same here," said an older man who'd been fined for having his grandkids' bikes on the front lawn. "Within 6 days, we had the signatures. We submitted the petition to the county clerk and scheduled a community vote. The turnout was massive. People brought lawn chairs, coolers, even a grill. It felt less like a vote and more like a block party with purpose. We tallied the results publicly, right there on a whiteboard under the pavilion. 84% in favor of dissolution. The HOA was dead." But even after the vote, there were things to clean up. The HOA had locked down the community bank account, so we filed a civil complaint to freeze the assets. A judge granted it within 48 hours, pending full audit. Meanwhile, the investigators found something else. Buried in the back of a filing cabinet in Craig's garage were dozens of return checks, payments from homeowners that had never been deposited into the HOA account. Instead, they were rerouted to a shell company listed under Craig's name. The fraud charges against him doubled. And then came the part no one had expected. Investigators found a series of audio recordings stored on a password-protected flash drive in Beverly's home. They were mostly strategy meetings recorded without the other board members' knowledge. In one, Beverly could be heard coaching Craig on how to adjust the maps with a photo editing program and make the boundaries look more flexible. Another clip had her laughing about pulling $6,000 from that loudmouth with the garden gnome collection. The DA's office released excerpts during a press conference. That sealed it. By now, the neighborhood had changed. People who had never spoken to each other before were sharing tools, trading garden tips, and organizing actual community events, potlucks, instead of punitive meetings. I helped Earl remove the lien paperwork from his file. Angela got appointed to the interim neighborhood committee, not an HOA, just a group of volunteers making sure things stayed fair. No dues, no fines, just neighbors helping neighbors. The cabin finally felt like home. One afternoon, as I was trimming back a stubborn patch of honeysuckle near the creek, a silver sedan pulled up. A woman stepped out, wearing slacks and a blazer, holding a folder. "Mr. Zander," she asked. "I'm with the state auditor's office." I just wanted to say your file was instrumental in opening this case. It's going to set precedent. I nodded, wiping my hands on my jeans. Good, maybe it'll stop the next Beverly before they start. She smiled faintly. We're recommending oversight legislation for HOAs statewide, mandatory audits. Criminal penalties for abuse of authority. I watched her drive off, then turned back to the water. The wind stirred the trees. Somewhere in the distance, someone started up a chainsaw. Life was normal again. Real. And finally, honest. That night, I burned the last letter Beverly had ever sent me. The fake seal curled in the flame and vanished into smoke. And for the first time since I bought the cabin, I slept with the windows open, knowing no one had power over my home but me. The audit findings hit the local news before the sun came up. I was brewing coffee when the headlines popped up on my phone. Willow Creek HOA misused over $140K in homeowner funds, county says. Beneath it was a photo of Beverly being led out of her house again, this time not in cuffs, but flanked by 2 investigators in dark blue windbreakers. Her face looked sunken, like the weight of exposure had finally settled on her. I called Mason just to confirm what I was seeing. It's real, he said. They found a second account, one she never disclosed to the board. I stared at the floor, steam twisting from the mug in my hand. What was it for? Trips, furniture. She bought a cedar hot tub for her back deck, listed it as a community wellness expense. I didn't laugh, it wasn't funny, it was surreal. For years, she'd been shaking down decent people, some on fixed incomes, others with kids in school, just to pad her life with luxuries she pretended were HOA business. And somehow, she'd convinced herself it was justified. The DA's office added embezzlement and wire fraud to her charges that same afternoon. The treasurer, Craig, flipped during a deposition and handed over emails showing Beverly had coached him on how to falsify meeting minutes and backdate votes that never happened. By evening, a judge issued a seizure order for her personal property, anything purchased with HOA funds. Angela and I stood in the gravel shoulder of the road when the moving truck pulled up to Beverly's house. 2 deputies supervised as contractors began hauling out boxes, a custom wine fridge, and a 20-foot outdoor dining table that had never once been used for a neighborhood event. Angela folded her arms and watched in silence. Finally, she said, "You think she actually believed she was doing the right thing?" "No," I said, "but I think she needed to." The next few weeks were quieter. The HOA's legal structure had been dissolved, but the fallout still rippled through the community. Some homeowners were trying to recover money they'd paid under false pretenses. Others were dealing with title complications from fraudulent liens. A few elderly residents who'd never questioned the dues now realized their savings had been siphoned for years. That's when I got the idea for the legal aid fund. I called in a favor with an old friend from college, Maya, who ran a small nonprofit that helped low-income homeowners fight housing fraud. She agreed to help us set up a temporary relief fund, and within a week, we had a GoFundMe page and pro bono lawyers reviewing cases. A retired schoolteacher named Dolores had her lien cleared within days. Another man, Henry, was reimbursed after we found proof that Beverly had double-billed him for community lighting upgrades on a street with no lights. I kept my distance from the news coverage. The reporters wanted interviews, but I figured the story had already spoken for itself. I wasn't trying to be a hero, I just didn't like being lied to. And I really didn't like bullies hiding behind fake authority. One rainy afternoon, I walked down to the riverbank behind the cabin, cleared some overgrown brush, and finally put up the bench I'd been meaning to build since I moved in. The air smelled like wet wood and moss. For the first time in months, everything felt still. That night, I got a knock on the door. It was Earl the veteran who'd nearly lost his home. He held up a 6-pack of root beer and nodded toward the porch. We sat for over an hour, not talking much. Just listening to the wind through the trees and the occasional crack of branches from the woods beyond the creek. Eventually, he said, I served overseas, saw some things I don't talk about, but you know what really messes with your head? When the enemy pretends to be on your side. I nodded, letting the words settle. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. Found this in my attic, thought you'd want to see it. Inside was a signed letter from Beverly dated 7 years ago. It was a draft never mailed. In it, she outlined a plan to expand governance through moral obligation, claiming that homeowners needed strong guidance or else the community would fall into disorder. This is what she really thought, he said. That we couldn't run our own lives without her. I added the letter to the growing archive of documents we were passing along to the state attorney general. They'd announced a broader investigation into HOA governance across the state, using Willow Creek as the catalyst. New legislation was already being drafted: mandatory audits, term limits for board members, and strict boundaries on jurisdiction claims. Angela joined that advisory committee. So did Henry and Carla. I helped them organize the first community town hall, just a casual gathering to brainstorm how people wanted things run from now on. No bylaws, no fines, just consensus and shared effort. At that first meeting, someone brought up the idea of a tool library. Another suggested monthly river cleanups. A teenager volunteered to mow lawns for elderly residents for free. Nobody mentioned dues. Nobody asked for power. It was the kind of neighborhood people always talked about wanting but rarely built. Beverly's trial began in early spring. She pled not guilty on all counts, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury didn't take long. She was convicted on 7 counts of fraud and sentenced to 5 years, with restitution ordered in full. Craig received a lighter sentence in exchange for cooperation: 18 months, and a permanent ban from holding any fiduciary position. The court appointed a financial trustee to liquidate Beverly's assets and distribute the proceeds to victims. Most homeowners wouldn't get all their money back, but it was something, and more importantly, it was accountability. The day after the verdict, someone left a small potted plant on my porch. No note, just a rosemary bush in a clay pot. I set it by the window and let it grow. By summer, the river was running high and clear. Kids played on tire swings. Someone had built a little lending library box out of cedar planks and filled it with paperbacks. The old HOA sign had been taken down and replaced with a wooden post carved simply with Willow Creek ESD. 1999 reclaimed 2024. I still kept the security cameras just in case. Not out of fear, but because a lesson hard learned shouldn't be forgotten. One night, as the sun set in a blaze of gold across the water, I walked down to the bench by the river and finally exhaled. Not just out of relief, but out of the satisfaction that comes with knowing you didn't back down. That when someone tried to rewrite the rules to benefit themselves, you stood up, not just for yourself, but for everyone else they tried to step over. Justice didn't erase what happened. But it made sure it couldn't happen again, and that was enough.